Hey y'all, today's video is going to be about fishing leaders. More so on the way I tie mine. Like everything else out there, there's a million and one ways to do them. Now, keep in mind, if World's Worst Fishing wasn't already taken on YouTube, that would be my channel name. I suck at fishing, but I love it, I do it, my knots are rather strong. It's everything else that goes along with fishing and trying to get on them and catch them. Talking about leaders and why you use them. They help save time out on the water. They help save your main line, so you're not having to change out your main line all the time because you keep breaking off and have to tie on new line over and over and over. The biggest reason I like to use leaders is more so from a safety aspect. I do a lot of kayak fishing. Having a kayak out on the water is a lot like having a motorcycle out on the roads. Nobody sees the motorcycle until they hit the motorcycle, unfortunately. And it's the same way on the water. A lot of these boats don't pay attention and they could care less about kayakers. The last thing you want to be doing out on that water is putting all of your concentration into tying leaders. It's not that it really takes that long, but the line's so small that it takes a lot of concentration and hand coordination to make sure that you can tie these knots. If you're focused on tying your line, you're not focused on your surroundings. You don't want to spend all this time retying a leader and not focused on what's around you. And also, once again, you want to have a line in the water, not out the water. You definitely ain't gonna catch no fish if you can't have a line in the water. What I'm gonna end up doing is I'm gonna show you the knots that I use and how to tie them using a piece of rope, so you can actually see the process of tying the knots. And then I'm going to go to the string and show you how I tie my leaders using these knots. I use 4 knots consistently, but the 4 that I use for me work the best. I use a polymer knot, which is one of the strongest knots you can have. I use a modified slip knot. If you look up how to tie a slip knot, the way I do it is completely backwards, but it works. And I never had, well, I can't say never. I very seldom have that knot slip out. So it works perfect for me. There's 2 other knots that I use, but I don't know the name of them. I've looked them up a million times to try to figure them out, and I haven't had any luck. I'll just show you what they are. Unfortunately, I won't have a name for them. Now, with that being said, once again, I appreciate you watching these videos. I'm going to make a video later down the road on why I started doing YouTube. And spoiler alert, it's not for the money. Of course, making money would be awesome off of these, but it's not. But you'll have to stay tuned for me to get into an elaborate video why I decided to start making YouTube videos. Now stay tuned, and here comes the knot tying. Okay, so I have washer, some rope. First knot I'm going to show you is a polymer knot. I like to take it, grab me a bit, make a loop with it. Take the loop, put it through the hole. In this case, this is representing the eye of a hook. Go about halfway down. I'm going to tie a granny knot, like such. I'm going to take the loop that's in my pointer finger, and I'm going to take the hook or whatever I'm tying around, stick it through that loop, bringing it back to the top, and then pull and cinch down. Once again, it's a polymer knot. This knot right here is actually a rather strong knot, and it's a rather easy one to tie as well. Doesn't take a lot of time. Now, sometimes when you're messing with fishing string, that loop can get stuck down here. All you have to do is just take your time and use your finger to push it back up to the top, and once you get it to the top, hold it and cinch it down.
pulling the tag end will cinch that loop down a lot easier. About the new mic that I'm trying out. If you hear birds in the background, it means that this mic is too sensitive and I'm going to end up with another one. If you don't hear anything, then it's doing its job. Okay. Next knot I'm going to tie is a variation of a slip knot. If you look these up, you'll see them done a different way than the way I do mine. But I like to just take it, start off with a granny knot again. And then I take whatever I'm tying it to and I twist. Now for this video, and using this rope, I'm only going to do 2 twists. But if I'm doing it on an actual hook, I'll do 5 or 6. And then I'll take the tag end, slip it through, and I'll pull both of them. Okay. It's important to remember that if you just pull both of them, and it'll appear tight, but it'll slip right out real easy. You have to pull and then come back on your main line and pull that nice and tight. And you'll actually watch it. It'll look like it's going to start to unravel, and then it'll just cinch right down on itself. This knot works. I use this for, if I can't tie a polymer knot, I use this knot. The next knot that I'm going to show you, I don't know the name to it. It's how you can tie a loop in your line in order to put a hook on a like on a bottom rig or something along those lines. So I make my loop. For this demonstration, I'm only going to do it 3 or 4 times, but if I'm doing it on an actual fishing line, I'll do it 6. But I just loop the line through, come back, and I create a little hole in those loops, take that big loop and pull it through. Okay. Now if I was doing this with fishing line, I'd actually bite right here and use my 2 hands to pull. Or you could hold this and somehow pull. But the rope doesn't work that way, so I have to kind of cinch it down. And as you pull it in, that'll get tight, and then you'll have a loop in your line in order to put a hook on. The way you do that is you go through the eye, just come around, nice and simple, and there you go. So my last knot, the easiest little knot, I used to have a name for it, now I can't remember it. You make your little loop again, come down a little bit away from the tag, make you another loop, and then feed your main loop through the little loop. You can do it twice, or even 3 times if you want, but I find that this is plenty strong enough. And I'll do this if I'm in a hurry or I don't feel like making a leader. That way I can sit there and still put on my weight. And if I need to change my weight, and the reason I do these kind of knots, that way I'm not having to cut my line every time that I decide I want to change my hook set or my weights out. You know, I don't want to waste too much time sitting there. The current's strong in one place I'm fishing, I go to another place and it's not as strong. I'd rather just hurry up and loop that off, put on a smaller weight. That way I can get right back to fishing. Now that I showed you all the knots that I mainly use, we'll go ahead and get into how I build my leaders. So the first thing that I do is I grab my string, I cut 2 to 3 foot. However long you want your leader to be, cut longer. After I cut my string to length, I'll go ahead and tie my first knot, which will be that inline knot I showed you. I usually end up doing 2 inline knots per leader. I've seen people do 3 to 5. I think that's overkill, but some people like it. And sometimes I do just 1. It all kind of depends on my mood. For the top of my leader, that's going to tie to my main line, I always use a swivel. You can tie an inline knot, and they're really strong. There's different kind of knots for different kind of strings that you tie into each other. To be honest, I have a hard time tying these knots, and I'd rather just use a swivel. So once I get that polymer knot cinched down, I give it a couple more tugs to make sure that I get all the slack out. I pull in that tag line. That helps close that loop a little better. And then I just clip off the tag with a pair of clippers. So if you're taking the time to build your fishing leaders, I like to use extra hardware. In this case, I'm using a swivel with an interlock snap on it. This just makes changing out my weights a lot easier. I'm going to tie it to the bottom of the line using a polymer knot. I like to put the weights on before I put the hooks on. That way it just adds a little extra tension to the line. Makes it easier when putting those hooks on those loops. There's so many variations that you can go with on setting these hooks up. I don't always use floats. I'm using a float on here to show you that you can. Sometimes I do like using them, especially if I tie a little closer to the weight. It just helps to keep the hook floating above. And plus the color can attract fish. The beads help add extra noise, and for some fish that resembles eggs. So you can sometimes almost attract a fish just by having a bead on there without any bait. And then for this particular leader, I'm using a 1/0 circle hook. Circle hooks are good when it comes to hook sets to prevent fish from swallowing the hook. Although it is a little harder to catch a fish with a circle hook, but it's not that much different, just a little different. I think the reward of not gutting a fish that you have to throw back is better than being able to set the hook every time and catch a fish every time. Especially with strict laws in North Carolina, you can't really keep a lot of your fish you catch anyways. I'd rather throw them back, let them get bigger, try to catch them again next year. But I just continue to set up the hooks, and then after this, the leader is done. I'm going to take it, put it in a bag. By the way, those are the baggies that came from my Shapeoko. Recycling them. I put them in the bag and then put them in my tray and wait to use them when I need them. It's nice and convenient. This is the bottom rig. The next rig I'm going to show you is going to be the Carolina rig. What I'm doing here is I'm starting off by tying a swivel onto about 2-foot piece of string, tying it using a polymer knot. I'm adding an extra step in here. in order to have one complete leader. Remember, the whole point of this video is for me showing you how to create leaders that allow you to reset your line without having to spend a lot of time out on the water doing it. I'm going to take a little oval weight and a bead. I'm targeting predator type fish. They're attracted to the sound, and that's what the bead is for. The bead is going to hit up against the weight and cause a little clicking noise under the water to help gain the attention. You could just omit this step, and when you're tying your leader to your line, you could put the weight and the bead on your main line and then tie the swivel to your main line. But like I said, it's all going to be, I'm trying to get this set up to where all I have to do is just tie one knot instead of have to worry about grabbing a weight and a bead and get it all set up while I'm in the boat fishing. I tie another swivel on using another polymer knot. This gives me a little play in my weight, so it moves back and forth as I move it through the water. I can get that clicking noise that I'm looking for. In this case, your tag line should be really long, which you're going to use to finish the leader. I tie that leftover string on using that slip knot. And then I'll cut that. In this case, I'm adding a float. You don't have to add a float. I just wanted it, I didn't want to drag it completely on the bottom surface. But you can completely omit this float. Once again, there's a million ways to do this. This is just the way I wanted to make this leader. After I slip the float on, then I tie my hook straight to that line. And that's a Carolina rig. So what happens if you're out on the water and you don't have any more leaders and you don't want to take the time to build leaders? I'm going to show you a couple quick and fast ways that I do this by using just the main line. So to make a very quick bottom rig, all I do is make a loop in my main line, tie it with a granny knot, and it gives me one big loop. I'll cut that loop in half, making one side a little bit shorter than the other side. I'll tie another little loop knot. That way I can quickly attach my weight. I'll tie my hook using a slip knot. This is a very fast and effective way to make a bottom rig. And for demonstration purposes, I'm gonna quickly change out my weights. Even though there's the same size here, the concept is that I could use 2 different size weights if I needed to.
All right. So these 2 leaders that I just showed you, more than enough to help you catch fish inland. There's other things that you can use. There's other techniques, everything. But if you stick with a Carolina rig and a bottom rig, you're gonna catch fish. There's no doubt in my mind that you'll be able to catch fish using these 2. And then I also showed you how you can tie up your line when you're in a hurry. If you do run out of leaders or forgot to make leaders, or even if you're just too lazy to reach back, you can tie your line off rather quickly to get a bottom rig without needing to take a lot of time. Once again, I appreciate you watching. I'll see you in the next video.